in the saddle. Talking about Neil. Talking about Neil Young. Hi, I'm Abby. I have a lot of records, and this is Vinyl Monday. So welcome back, or welcome if this is your first time here. Vinyl Monday is the who, what, when, where, why, and how do I feel about classic albums in my collection. If TV show length episodes aren't your thing, don't worry. I also do Vinyl Monday in 60 seconds here on my channel, over on my Instagram, as well as TikTok. Coming back from my first break week of season 5, 4 episodes in a row is no longer the norm for the show, but come on, I wasn't gonna miss a Smashing Pumpkins anniversary. I hope you all had a happy and safe Halloween, everyone stayed warm, whether by costume or the good old-fashioned liquid jacket, and for my American viewers, I hope coming off daylight savings time isn't screwing you up too bad. Get this. I first covered this album 3 years ago. My god! And was never totally happy with my coverage. My research and writing skills were still germinating, my ear and ability to really listen to music hadn't developed yet. This album in and of itself was a do-over of a debut. As its producer once said, be great or be gone. This is my attempt at great and my hopefully proper do-over. This week's album is Neil Young with Crazy Horse. Everybody knows this is nowhere. Congrats if you guessed this one. Remember, if you want to play along, all you gotta do is check out my post tab. That's where I post the hints to what the next album is gonna be. I make announcements, I host polls, you can find all of that on my channel. And if you so choose, you can always read the written versions of my reviews on my website, linked in the description. Alright, let's take the plastic off. So my copy is an original. As you can see from the state of the gatefold, it's a little squished. This album has been in my collection for a minute now. It's survived, I think, 4 moves now. Now let's talk about this cover art. Neil poses for photographer Frank Bez in his new uniform, that which he'll wear for pretty much the rest of his career. A flannel over a black turtleneck with the sleeves rolled up and jeans. He poses with his dog Winnipeg. Aww. According to a blog post by Neil on the archives, this photo shoot was originally meant for his first self-titled album, but they went with Roland Deal's moody blues-ish painting instead. So when it came time for album number 2, the photo was already there. Why not? It's not like they had to do much. They literally just slapped the Crazy Horse text on there and the new album title and called it a day. And when you open up the gatefold, you can absolutely tell this was meant for his first record. There are still a few lingering shots of Neil in his Hollywood Indian getup. The photos of Crazy Horse were taken in Neil's own living room. On Everybody Knows This Is Nowhere, we of course have the man of the hour, Neil Young, on lead vocals, guitar, and serving as principal songwriter. And making their world debut on this record is Crazy Horse. Danny Whitten on guitar and harmony vocals, Billy Talbot on bass, and Ralph Molina on drums. They're joined by special guests Robin Lane, who provides vocals on Round and Round, and Bobby Notkoff of The Rockets, playing violin on Running Dry. Everybody Knows This Is Nowhere was produced by David Briggs with Neil Young. Roll transition. So we last left off with Neil in 1968-ish, with our main fringe jacket-wearing man leaving the Buffalo Springfield. For real this time. The Springfield were broken up by managerial trouble, inability to follow up the success of For What It's Worth, too many cooks in the kitchen, and supremely bad luck. In the words of biographer Jimmy McDonough, Young learned some lessons from his tumultuous time in the Springfield. He would never relinquish control over his music, or much of anything else in his life, again. Neil made it clear to the music press he was no longer the Hollywood Indian. Post-Springfield, Neil links up with his friend Joni Mitchell's new manager, Elliot Roberts. No, not that one. but the Ringo video was really good. And Neil meets his new go-to producer, David Briggs. His debut solo single, The Loner, flopped, and the self-titled album was promoted so poorly no one was even sure if it was out or not. Reprise's press release for the record set up the classic Neil image. Quote, brewing, brooding, his stiff black hair dangling, making an ungainly gothic arch across his forehead. And, quote, challenging, absorbing, frustrating, about as much fun as Peer Gynt, and not sexy. Damn! Unsurprisingly, this press release did not do much to move copies of the album. Neil was never happy with self-titled. The material was weak and it sounded bad to his ear. Around the same time as its release, he's hyping up a new group called The Rockets. Enter The Rockets. That was anticlimactic. Because Danny Whitten liked the music he liked while growing up in the Jim Crow South, doo-wop and R&B, he'd skip the white dance halls and go right down to the black clubs. There, he learned how to dance. Discharged from the United States Navy for his arthritis, he wound up in LA, frequenting the Peppermint West. You might remember the original New York location for putting The Twist on the map, or being the place where the Ronettes were discovered. At the Peppermint West, dancing in competitions to make ends meet, Danny met Billy Talbot. He wound up in Hollywood after a failed doo-wop group out in New York. They link up with Ralph Molina to form Danny and the Memories. Somewhere along the way, this doo-wop group winds up in San Francisco, dropping acid, and becomes a rock and roll band with a single produced by Sly Stone. Man, everyone is in this story! Danny started seeing Robin Lane. The group collected fiddle player Bobby Notkoff and became The Rockets. The Rockets had a couple close brushes with success. Danny Hutton tried to poach Danny Whitten for Three Dog Night. They ended up covering Let Me Go on their first album. The Rockets only released one self-titled album in March of 1968. It was supposed to be released on Atlantic Records, but got shunted over to White Whale after exec Ahmet Erdogan allegedly took offense to some of their lyrics. But they were more so known for their jam sessions at Rocket HQ than for their actual music. A mutual friend named Autumn Amato introduced Billy to Neil Young. Neil was quickly absorbed into these jam sessions, which he moved to his place, up in Laurel Canyon. He took to Danny in particular. Nils Lofgren said, quote, Neil would be the first to tell you that Danny was one of his early mentors and influences. Danny had that great, deep Bee Gees vibrato with that California soul and lament. When the Rockets landed a week-long residence at the legendary Whiskey A Go-Go in August of 1968, Neil kinda inserted himself into it. He got up on the stage and played with them. It got him thinking that he wanted the guys for his own backing band. Just some of the guys. He was gonna poach Danny, Billy, and Ralph. Neil makes a surprise trip out to Ann Arbor, Michigan to play the Canterbury House at the end of 1968. In January of 1969, he returned to LA and put this thing in drive, booking initial sessions for what would become Everybody Knows This Is Nowhere. The original plan was to make a record structured like Neil's live shows. One side would be him solo, while the flip side would be him with a band. The guys never played Down by the River and Cowgirl in the Sand in the same set, though. That's why they're broken up across two sides of the LP. The oldest song on the album is Round and Round. Originally written for the Springfield, Neil brought it to the Rockets as a three-part harmony. The eventual title track, Everybody Knows This Is Nowhere, was attempted during self-titled sessions 5 months before, but it just didn't work. But when we talk about the makeup of Everybody Knows This Is Nowhere, we can't not talk about the fever. In his memoir, Waging Heavy Peace, Neil wrote, quote, I had been sick with the flu, holed up in bed in the house. Susan, his wife at the time, was bringing me soup and good stuff, but I still felt like shit. I was delirious half the time. The guitar closest to his bedside was left in D modal tuning. First, he wrote Cinnamon Girl. There's a rumor this song is about Jim Morrison's old lady, Pamela Courson. Cinnamon referring to her red hair. A much more plausible identity of Neil's muse at this time was folk singer Jean Ray. Notably not Neil's wife. Neil married Susan shortly after leaving the Springfield for good. It seems he has a thing for waitresses, she worked at the diner he was a regular at, but the marriage was already on the rocks. Quote, "At the time, there was a song in E minor on the radio that I liked. Sunny or something like that. I can't find what song he's talking about. If you know, please put it in the comments, but he jammed on that and got Down by the River. The song kept looping in my head endlessly, like some things do when I'm sick and maybe a little delirious." Last was Cowgirl in the Sand. Neil recognized this was, quote, "pretty unique to write 3 songs in one sitting. And I'm pretty sure that my semi-delirious state had a lot to do with that." Everybody Knows This Is Nowhere was recorded and mixed at a regular spot in the Crosby, Stills, and Nash-averse, Wally Heider's studio. On the archives, Neil wrote, "I sure remember those sessions well. I still see Ralphie glance at me during the recording of Down by the River, or maybe Running Dry, with a look of pure joy on his face. This was the beginning of something that really had it." What was the atmosphere like in the studio? Absolutely stoned out of their minds. Naturally, considering the substance going around, a defining trait of this material was its length. Both Down by the River and Cowgirl in the Sand were stretched from basic verse, chorus, verse to 9 and 10 minutes long, respectively. It just happened. We just started playing instrumentals and we didn't stop. The energy was right. We just kept going. But the jams are not without their studio magic. Down by the River was edited heavily to fit the constraints of the vinyl format, and because the guys lost their way a couple times. Despite the tangents, Ralph describes the album being recorded pretty much as quickly as the band happened. No rehearsals. Neil walks in with a song, then we jump in. We get it in 1-2 takes. After that, the feel, heart, and emotion are lost. Any more takes, and now you're just playing a part. They were at Neil's house in Topanga. When you're young, there are no politics, nothing to get in the way. We just had fun playing. No thinking, just playing. It was very on the fly. Robin Lane thought the take of Round and Round was just a run-through. Meanwhile, George Whitzel and the rest of the Rockets still had no idea that Neil had basically exploded their band for himself. They naively thought that Danny, Billy, and Ralph would cut this record, go out on tour, and that would be it. They were right about one thing. The guys did go out on tour. They actually toured this album before it was released. Recording was broken up between January and March of 1969 for tour. They went back out in May. They hit the famous Bitter End Club in New York, the Fillmore East with Miles Davis, and a mob joint in Rhode Island, emptied by a fight breaking out during Cowgirl in the Sand. Somewhere along the line, Neil suggested the name Crazy Horse. Not and Crazy Horse, with Crazy Horse. There was a distinction there. I am not sure why I did that, but I liked it being different. I liked that I was with them. Like we were together, not separate. George Whitzel was wrong in thinking there'd ever be a Rockets again. The track listing of Everybody Knows This Is Nowhere goes as follows. Opening up side 1, we have Cinnamon Girl, followed by the title track, Everybody Knows This Is Nowhere. Then Round and Round, with subtitled It Won't Be Long, and side 1 closes with Down by the River. Opening up side 2, we have The Losing End, with subtitle When You're On, Running Dry, subtitle Requiem for the Rockets, and the album closes with Cowgirl in the Sand. According to the Neil Young archives, Everybody Knows This Is Nowhere was released on May 14th, 1969, marketing noted Canadian Neil as an American country bumpkin. Quote, unpretentious, honest, direct, sincere, down to earth. And Reprise promised free dirt from Laurel Canyon for anybody who mail-ordered the album. I don't know of anybody who took advantage of that. Legendary Sunset Strip impresario Rodney Bingenheimer. Wait, sorry.
Rodney Bingenheimer
was the first to hype the album up. Down by the River was released a single first. It didn't really go anywhere, when Cinnamon Girl got the single treatment, Rodney hyped it up in his column for Go magazine. The original 1969 review of the album isn't written very well, so I'll quote Greg Kott's 30th anniversary retrospective instead. I'm skeptical about the group's interplay being, quote, more suggestive of Ornette Coleman, but I agree it's, quote, at once primitive and abstract. Quote, some listeners found it crude, but the gloriously spontaneous sound forged on Everybody Knows This Is Nowhere would endure, not only as a blueprint for Young and Crazy Horse, but as an influence on countless bands, from Sonic Youth to Son Volt. Now, at the same time as all of this dirt from the canyon nonsense, one of Neil's ex-bandmates' new groups is having a bit of a moment right now. They only released a few albums, you might have heard of them, only Crosby, Stills, and Nash. Around the end of Crazy Horse's spring tour, Steve Stills and drummer Dallas Taylor turn up looking for Neil. They wanted him as a sideman first. Wait, wasn't Neil rocking the boat one of the reasons the Springfield broke up in the first place? Yes. Did Steve just forget that? Sounds like it! Neil's motivations for tagging along with Crosby, Stills, and Nash appear to be for raising his profile with Crazy Horse explicitly. Neil promised Crazy Horse this wouldn't affect his commitment to them or their ability to play as their own outfit. The guys were cool with it. Billy said, quote, we just said, go for it. Young wasn't even supposed to be on the marquee, but as negotiations went on and Elliot Roberts got involved, the deal changed. So we got Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young. By the end of the summer, Y had officially linked up with CSN to play the biggest stage of the 1960s. Or rather, a big muddy farm. It was only CSN's second live gig ever. Neil was weird about being filmed, so unfortunately we have not seen the Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young footage, and they aren't properly on the Woodstock soundtrack either. Their performance of Sea of Madness, with Neil on the lead vocal, is actually taken from a gig at the Fillmore East. Why interloping CSN at this time created a really interesting dynamic. As Neil Young became, you know, Neil f***ing Young, the tables turned. After the Gold Rush certainly benefited from the CSN connection, as did all of the guys' solo albums from that time, but Harvest was another matter entirely. A massive hit from which Neil springboarded a long, illustrious, and forever-changing career. Through the 70s, it went from Y needing CSN to CSN needing Y. Then you have Crazy Horse, who despite their best efforts and Ralph asserting they've never considered themselves just a backing band, they just don't fare well without Neil. He, quote, destroyed one band and forever disrupted the chemistry of the other, but also pushed each group to some of their highest musical achievements. In interview in 1973, squarely in the middle of his ditch era, Neil was uncharacteristically affectionate towards a past pop work. I don't think there was anything on it that I didn't like. I like it all. That's when a change came over me. Right then, I started trying to do just what I was doing, you know? Just trying to be real. Show people where my head is at. I just wanted them to know where I was at. Though it's ranked startlingly low on Rolling Stone's 500 Greatest Albums of All Time list at number 407 on the most recent iteration, Everybody Knows has a legacy in the Neil canon as, well, being the album that properly starts the Neil canon. Cinnamon Girl, Down by the River, and Cowgirl in the Sand are all included on the Decade Comp from 1977. I've always wanted to replicate this cover shot, and the title track was included in the soundtrack of Cameron Crowe's Almost Famous. In the scene where Russell Hammond shows up to the high school kids' house party in Oklahoma or wherever, then
I am a golden god!
very interesting to play Everybody Knows, the title track from an album from 1969, over a scene of a house party that's supposed to take place in 1973. It shows that A, This album stuck like glue, and B, rural towns are usually a few years behind the culture of the cities. The Dream Syndicate covered Cinnamon Girl, Radiohead had been playing it live for years, Mudhoney interpolated Neil's guitar sign-off for one of their songs. In a really weird intersection of my tastes, Hole interpolated Cinnamon Girl for Starbelly off Pretty on the Inside. This record was of course produced by Kim Gordon, who toured with Neil while in Sonic Youth. It's no surprise that Smashing Pumpkins have covered Cinnamon Girl too. It appears as a bonus track on the Pisces Iscariot comp. The Meters and Low have covered Down by the River. I think that's super f***ing cool. My mom finds it cool that the Indigo Girls covered it, and Car Seat Headrest reversed it for the Gun song off their 2013 album Nervous Young Man. I don't know, I always preferred Teens of Denial. And who could forget the Byrds, covering Cowgirl in the Sand on their 1973 self-titled album. So, what do I think of Everybody Knows This Is Nowhere? It's no secret that Crazy Horse is Neil's favorite group he's ever played with. A lot of people think Crazy Horse are bad musicians, to say the very least, David Crosby being one of them. And I quote, "The mere mention of Crazy Horse sent David Crosby into a 20-minute rant. What does Crazy Horse give Neil Young? A clean slate. They should have never been allowed to be musicians at all. They should have been shot at birth. I've heard the bass player muff a change in a song 17 times in a row. Cinnamon Girl. He still doesn't know it." Neil has always defended this, explaining it's unpretentious, it's in the moment, it's fun, and it's real with Crazy Horse. To Nick Kent, he said, quote, "Well, I just liked these people. I wasn't looking, I just found them." In a lot of ways, Everybody Knows is built in Crazy Horse's image. They didn't set out to capture a perfect moment, they wanted to capture the moment. Neil said in 1970, "We were really feeling each other out, and we didn't know each other, but we were turned on to what was happening. I wanted to record that, because that never gets recorded. It captures a certain naivete." To Jean-Charles Costa much later on, he said, "That whole album was like catching the group just as they were getting to know each other. We didn't even know what we sounded like until we heard the album." What did they sound like? Earthy, a little gritty, naturalistic. To my memory, Everybody Knows was the first Neil album I cherished. I associate it with the tiny L-shaped apartment I lived in with 6 other people in my junior year of college. These were the blonde on blonde, lying on my back drunk listening to echoes as the room spun around me years. And it was pretty grungy years. You would not have found me without a flannel. I had this green flannel that I loved and I think I lost. I know I'm wearing it in this photo and I'm so mad that I don't have any photos of myself where it's like visible, because you have to understand I wore this all the time, and I wore it with my Doc Martens. It's natural my 20-year-old self would have gravitated towards the godfather of grunge. Where did Neil's godfather of grunge epithet come from? Cinnamon Girl. Neil uses D-modal, aka grunge tuning, where he tunes both E strings down to D. Him and Steven Stills originally worked this out for Bluebird. They figured it sounded sort of like a raga drone that was very en vogue at the time, but Neil just never stopped using it. Cinnamon Girl, Fucking Up, Ragged Glory, War of Man, One of These Days. I could go on. Greg Kot described the Cinnamon Girl riff as, quote, elemental in its own way as anything on the first album by proto-punks, The Stooges.
That's peanut butter.
Again, I think this is a little off the mark by Greg. I don't know about the Stooges comparison, but I know about the Egyptians. Neil described the riff like the Egyptians rolling giant stones up a pyramid on logs. It's huge and it's moving. Unstoppable. Think Egyptians. It's a stupidly simple ascend and descend with a moronic stomp on drums. The hand claps came from early 60s girl groups. Neil specifically cited My Boyfriend's Back.
My boyfriend's back and you're gonna be in trouble. Hey lad, hey lad.
All of this was meant to undo the perceived damage that Self-Titled did. Flowery, overdubbed, and unfocused, Cinnamon Girl is not. In how loose the guy's delivery is, Danny's harmony sounds remarkably close to Neil's lead and tight. I always assumed it was just Neil double-tracked. I want to live with a cinnamon girl. I could be happy the rest of my life with a cinnamon girl. A dreamer of pictures, I run in the night. You see us together, chasing the moonlight. My cinnamon girl. This is a picture of romance in Laurel Canyon, striking just the right balance between committal and non-committal, domestic and freewheeling. Neil was right to change the lyric from I wanna marry a cinnamon girl. It would have been out of touch with the times and slightly bigamous. 10 silver saxes, a bass with a bow. The drummer relaxes and waits between shows for his cinnamon girl. The cinnamon girl is a groupie, always waiting with open arms and praise. The looseness of the band plays into that smoky backstage. I have hair in my eyes. The looseness of the band plays into that smoky backstage setting, but the melody of the bridge makes it more wired with energy than laid back. I love the scoop up those rock-solid guitars make turning out of that last line of each verse. It's dramatic. The point of view of the song either switches from Neil to that drummer in this struggling band, or the cinnamon girl herself, needing help from her folks to keep chasing the moonlight. Pa, send me money now. I'm gonna make it somehow. I need another chance. It's followed by one of Neil's signature one-note solos, more on that later, and the least enthusiastic I have ever heard. It ends with a fade out of a perfect length and a muscular, ambiguous, all too brief Neil solo of more than one note. Cinnamon Girl is a song so indisputably solid and so damn good, it makes a girl want to dye her hair red. At surface level, the title track is that cliche of the simple country boy who regrets leaving his small town for the big city. I think I'd like to go back home and take it easy. I wish that I could be there right now. But this in fact masks how Neil himself feels about the canyon. Everybody seems to wonder what it's like down here. We gotta get away from this day-to-day running around. Everybody knows this is nowhere. The optimism and the magic that once watered the flora of the canyon is drying up, according to Neil. And he had a point. By 1969, the Laurel Canyon scene had been going for like 3 whole years at this point. The hippies were getting rich and moving out of the canyon. Take John and Michelle Phillips, who bought a house in Bel Air and were driving fancy cars. It's interesting to note that Harvest opens with Out on the Weekend. Think I'll pack it in, buy a pickup, take it down to LA. Then on Tonight's the Night, he's got a whole song about renting a car and escaping to some diner in Albuquerque where no one knows who he is. I'm sure he repeated that cycle a few times between those albums, but this is a central principle of Neil Young the songwriter. Do I stay or do I go? No, not like that. Everybody Knows is permeated by the signature Crazy Horse drum beat. Boom, boom, thack. Boom, boom, thack. Boom, boom, thack. I'm hearing it in my dreams. The standout horseman on this track is Danny. His playing and Neil's click together so seamlessly that you miss the intricacy on the first few hundred passes. It comes so naturally. That's the power of musicians in the moment. And you know a harmony is damn good when you sing the harmony instead of the melody. I also love the goofy He's getting his Damon Albarn on. Stoic Neil won't take himself too seriously. Danny Bruce said, Danny Whitten in the Crazy Horse Sound Equation was the heart and the soul. He plays the second in a gorgeous twin acoustic guitar part on Round and Round. It's unclear who's singing the third part on those choruses. Some texts imply it's Danny on a super high falsetto. To my ear, it sounds like overdubs by Robin. One of the most consistently underrated songs in Neil's classic period, Round and Round is about the ups and downs of a relationship that has run its course, but neither party is willing to leave for pride, fear of the new, or whatever else. How slow and slow and slow it goes to mend the tear that always shows. It festers, just getting worse through complacency. They're lying to themselves. I love how the music follows the round and round the lyrics speak of. Robin's wordless vocals over Neil's verses are high like a swing on a carnival ride. Neil's vibrato is really wide at the end of When You Step on Your Pride and You Cry. Singing live was still a struggle for him at this time. One can imagine him hunched over his guitar and rendering himself totally out of breath, kind of like I do when I make these videos. It's like he's eking out every last drop of breath into this. In 1970, Neil had this to say about Down by the River. There's no real murder in it. It's about blowing your thing with a chick. Very funny, Neil. If you think about it, the root of that situation isn't too far off from what actually happens in the song. A man unable to control himself. Jealousy and entitlement drives our narrator to do something he can't take back, shooting his baby dead down by the river. Her killing is him exacting control in the highest degree. If I can't have you, no one can. This is the madness of a scorned man. Neil uses the phrase over the rainbow. At least in a song like Hey Joe, there's a clear motive. The woman stepped out. The guy in Down by the River is even more terrifying because we don't know his motive. The closest thing we have are the opening lines. Be on my side, I'll be on your side. There is no reason for you to hide. It's so hard for me staying here all alone when you could be taking me for a ride. It implies he tried guilting this girl into being with him, and when she turned him down, he killed her. That's fucking dark. In the lyrics, we see a scattered frame of mind induced by murder or Neil's fever. An oddball line like, this much madness is too much sorrow, it's impossible to make it today, only add to the intrigue. Everything about this song feels heavy. The fuzzy surface noise in the beginning hangs like thick, hot fog over the riverbed. Billy's unrelenting bass line repeating so many times it's mind-numbing. It doesn't feel like notes anymore, it feels like inevitability. The group vocals over our narrator's confession, Down by the river, I shot my baby dead. It feels like other spirits around, as do lazy atmospheric slashes and whirs on the guitar. The guitar tone ranges from sharp to vague as this exercise builds into Neil and Danny in a pick-guard knife attack. And of course, we have the best, worst guitar solo ever. I'm not above clowning on Neil's one-note things. I know it's an exercise in tension and all, but Down by the River is something else. It sounds like Neil's fingers are glued to the fretboard. This mental image is made even funnier by the staccato moving around ever so slightly. He's trying so hard to free himself. Is Down by the River too long? It's hard to say. If you're like me and you take this as the psyche of the guy who lost control of his impulses in the worst way, it's only a little too long. I think I said as much in my original evaluation of this album, and it still holds true. Everybody Knows is for sure a front-loaded album. Though I love the side 2 opener, The Losing End, and I advocate for Running Dry, they're no Cinnamon Girl, Everybody Knows, and Round and Round. The former is a simple country bounce about a guy left lonesome after his lady splits town. Another case of I Think Danny singing a harmony so good it renders the melody obsolete. And some more of the guys goofing off. The latter is heavily indebted to folk songs, not the Bob Dylan folk, the original folk, that are repetitive so they're singable by a crowd. I advocate for Running Dry purely for Bobby Notkoff's violin playing. I wouldn't be surprised if in 1975 Bob Dylan picked up a copy of Everybody Knows and fixated on Running Dry, having Scarlett Rivera on the Rolling Thunder Review and Desire. It was in shades of Running Dry. I'm also taken aback by how lo-fi Neil's voice is on the verses versus the chorus and his own harmonies. Was this recorded at 2 different studios? Closing out Everybody Knows is the longest song on the album, the 10-minute blockbuster, Cowgirl in the Sand. Old enough now to change your name, when so many love you, is it the same? It's the woman in you that makes you want to play this game. The chorus of this song is controversial. Some critics, authors, even the Wikipedia page for this song say this is about a promiscuous woman. Other critics paint it misogynistic. I don't think Cowgirl is that simple. Not to bring CSN into this, but I've always interpreted Cowgirl as a you don't have to cry situation. A woman grappling with fame. No managers and where you have to be at noon. This song isn't about that struggle. Our Cowgirl struggles with the game. Seeking validation from fan adoration while being lonely in her personal life and the weird minefield that is parasocial relationships. Being in the spotlight inevitably cultivates those, especially if you're a woman. These people think they know you. They think they love you, but it's not really you. It's an image you sell on looks or personality or whatever. When so many love you, is it the same? No. It's the woman in you that makes you want to play this game. Women are taught by society to tear down other women, to win the affection of men. To win the affection of men. We're taught that that is the ultimate goal. Even if that's not really what our brains or hearts want. The genius of Cowgirl is that Neil is one of these guys, exalting an image of her they've made up in their heads. Hello, woman of my dreams, is this not the way it seems? Even the opening lines, hello cowgirl in the sand, is this place at your command? Can I stay here for a while? Can I see your sweet, sweet smile? Invoke a guy going to a show or the movies to admire her from afar. Neil clearly thought this first verse and chorus were important as he put them on the gatefold of the album. What Cowgirl and You Don't Have to Cry have in common is all this inevitably coming out when the girl is alone and this guy kind of observing from the outside. He's the narrator commenting on all of this, not her. Cowgirl's music feels like the sharpest on the album since Cinnamon Girl. The band is with it. Ralph is switching up his playing for once. Billy does in fact flub changes, maybe not 17 times, but I appreciate him being flexible with his typically droning part to complement what the rest of the guys are doing. The music rolls like tires down the freeway. Neil's offbeat, unpredictable phrasing throughout and the distortion helps keep the caddy from getting stuck in the sand. In interview for Mojo, Nick Kent asked, "You had this image of someone very confused, isolated, emotionally fragile and introspective. Was that a fair evaluation of your condition?" Neil replied, "No, not really. I didn't see myself like that. I always thought there was a funny side to my music." When asked, "Were you concerned about this image?" Neil replied, "What image? Listen, there was nothing to be concerned about. I really just wanted to make music. My only concern was to make the fucking record sound right." An image is, quote, like a mirror. And you can't get away from a mirror if you stand in front of it all the time, right? But if you step away from it, you don't notice it anymore. And that's what the stage is like for me. See, an image becomes meaningless inasmuch as it's always temporary. That right there is the core of Neil Young. An image is meaningless as much as it's always temporary. Everybody Knows is our first clear portrait of Neil Young, the musician, outside the context of any group or place in time, influenced by Dylan, the Stones, the encroaching influence of country music that was coming up through the canyon, and apparently Roy Orbison. In the liner notes of Decade, Neil wrote, "I remember Crazy Horse like Roy Orbison remembers Leah and Blue Bayou." Neil said the difference between self-titled and Everybody Knows was playing with people. Greg Kot agreed. If Neil Young, the album, had an aura of careful subtlety bordering on tentativeness, Everybody Knows This Is Nowhere felt raw, rushed, energized. Neil didn't find an audience immediately with Everybody Knows. That didn't come until after the Gold Rush and Harvest. What he did find was a group of musicians that truly spoke his language, acted on the same instincts that he acted on. They sought feel over all else, and didn't play to bullshit. In the pop culture consciousness, this Neil still stands as Neil Prime. The thin, reedy voice bordering on whimpering, guitar that straddles hero and noisy kid with an amp. Unexpectedly catchy tunes with lyrics that invoke what is deep and known, but not always easily acknowledged. Suede and flannel. With Crazy Horse. So simple, it makes you go, duh, but he was somehow the guy to crack the code. Everybody Knows This Is Nowhere is our second first introduction to Neil. Not a shabby reintroduction. My personal favorites off this one are, I don't know, I can't dream of splitting this thing up. Remember, if you want to keep up with all of my favorites from all of the Vinyl Mondays, I have a Spotify playlist linked in my description. I update it every week. And that's it! That is Everybody Knows This Is Nowhere, the Redux review. What do you think of this album? What do you think of Neil Young? Leave a comment letting me know. I love hearing what you guys have to say about albums that I love, and remember, despite what some guy on the internet says, your opinion matters. If you like what I do here, you should like this video and subscribe to my channel. I post new episodes of Vinyl Monday mornings at 11. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next week.